Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the Electrium podcast. We're starting to see a shift towards using electric vehicles and to find renewable energies to power our transport. We're also seeing a demand for EV car chargers. So how can we fulfill this demand? How about not only using hydrogen, but green hydrogen? This is an innovation that both Siemens and Geopura are looking into as part of a partnership. I spoke to Ian Wilkinson from Siemens and Andrew Cunningham from Geopura about this exciting project. Take a listen. Just to kick things off, really, we had the Goodwood Festival of Speed, and Siemens were there, and they displayed this hydrogen fuel cell. So I kind of want to know, firstly, how did this idea come about? Where did the idea of using and displaying this hydrogen fuel cell?
So the idea came from the challenge we face today as a society is looking at decarbonising our energy systems, and Siemens is very interested in the business opportunities that represents, as well as the sort of the social and moral benefits of decarbonisation. So it all fits into the challenge of identifying the technologies that we need to develop to decarbonise our energy systems, and transport is one of the tricky energy users to decarbonize, actually, because the energy demand is actually very high. Cars use a lot of energy, and it's inherently distributed. Obviously, cars are everywhere and they all move around. So really, it came from a conversation that Andrew Cunningham, Matthew Knight, and I had looking at commercially viable ways of decarbonising energy systems, thinking about transport, and the idea really came out of that for using green hydrogen to provide the electricity we need for electric vehicles.
And why hydrogen fuel? I mean, you could ask, is it green? Is it sustainable? And what advantage does it provide against perhaps other green energies?
Yeah, that's a good question. You can't take anything for granted with any of these technologies. All of these questions become quite complicated when you look at the details. But at the high level, certainly, you're in a situation where you burn most of our fuels, petrol, natural gas, shale gas, any of these fuels that we've got so comfortable and familiar with. And they work very well for us because they're very convenient liquid fuels. But unfortunately, they produce huge amounts of CO2 gas, and actually in many cases are responsible for other greenhouse gases as well, through leakage and general issues. So then that's what's destroying our climate and making the future of life on Earth looking very difficult indeed for human beings. So there's an argument there that says, yes, we need a fuel that when we burn it doesn't produce carbon dioxide. And actually, hydrogen is really good, because when you burn hydrogen or you oxidize hydrogen, you basically get water, as we know from our school days, and the purest water you can imagine as it happens. So that is obviously a massive advantage in terms of using hydrogen as a fuel.
And I was looking at the Goodwood Festival and the coverage that Siemens had done. You had actually had that drinking water, and then and people were drinking that water. It's just it looked bizarre to see, but it was from what you were doing, it was completely drinkable.
Yes, you wouldn't do that with a gas engine, for example. Effectively, you're drinking the exhaust. So the fuel cell, hydrogen fuel cell, produces electricity, water, and heat. Actually, if you can use the heat, then combined heat and power, for example, then the efficiencies go up. The efficiency is even better. But the byproduct, if you like, from producing the electricity and the heat is water, and it's very pure, as Andrew says, because the hydrogen that we put in is from a lot of electrolysis. That's very pure, and obviously started with water splitting in the first place, combining it with oxygen from the atmosphere, and you just produce water. I I would refer to it as deionized water because it doesn't have any of the minerals in it that we're used to. But obviously this never had the ions in it in the first place. So it's very pure, and yes, it is drinkable, as indeed people did. Drinking deionized water for a long time isn't a good idea, but it doesn't do you any harm in the short term.
And I presume can that still be used in other applications? Is it
Absolutely,
still,
it's pure. It's pure water. That's all it is. It's pure water. If that's what you need in your application, you could use it as a source of water. Yeah.
And what benefits then can this type of technology have for different projects? So, for example, like a large commercial project, what advantages can it bring?
Well, we have considerable difficulties, as Ian said, associated with transportation, particularly because we have got used to having huge amounts of power available to us under our right foot when we accelerate a car, or any form of transport for that matter, that we really don't tend to think in terms of the power that we have available to us. But if we think of a small family car, would often have, I don't know, maybe 130 horsepower engine, something of that sort. Well, that's 100 kilowatts. That's 100 one-bar electric fires, or a couple of hundred hair dryers. Or this is a significant amount of power that we expect to have, and over the course of a journey, that translates to an awful lot of energy. So you really are looking for massive, if we're going to electrify our transport system, and there's lots of advantages to doing that. Electric vehicles are fabulous to drive, and instant torque, and very few moving parts, and tremendous amounts of reasons why we'd want to electrify our transport system, not least the lack of carbon from exhaust emissions. But if we want to meet the challenge of that, then we need to basically get the renewable power to where it's needed. So we have excellent solar farms and wind turbine farms and all sorts of things, but of course they're generally remote from the places where people actually want to use the power and charge their vehicles. And our electricity distribution system, particularly at the local level, wasn't designed with this in mind. And the best way of transporting fuel, just like we have energy, is just like we have done in the past, is in fuel in tankers, except it needs to be renewable fuel and renewable tankers. That's how we've run our transport system up to date, and we see no reason why we shouldn't continue this way.
Go back to the Goodwood Festival of Speed, you were using that hydrogen fuel cell to power EV charging stations, and in particular, you had this e-chopper, an electrised motorbike, which, I mean, the design of it was superb, absolutely lovely. I love the kind of the blue glowing light in the kind of the middle of that bike. How did the idea come about for that? Was it that you wanted something obviously to display what you could power? And was there kind of a design idea of how that looked?
So the Goodwood Festival of Speed is a very public event, and it's the sort of the Siemens flagship event for the year. It's the event we go to and really display our capability in the UK. And you want something that people notice. Given Siemens' capability in power distribution, energy management, electric vehicle recharging posts and so on, it seemed to be a very good fit, to make a lot of sense for Siemens to take a electric vehicle with us and display at the Festival of Speed this year. You just described it very well. The e-chopper was very eye-catching, and it makes the point around electric vehicles and the electric vehicle charging and the power that they need. And we had a very compelling story about, we were able to provide the green electricity which these electric vehicles were charged with. So the whole, it encapsulated the vision we have here for this as a business opportunity, is that we can, the consumers, all they see is that they've got charging posts where they need them, and they know that the electricity they're getting from those charging posts to charge their electric vehicles, they know that electricity is green. Upstream, we're worrying about where that green energy comes from. Initially, we use that with Siemens electrolyzers to turn that into hydrogen. The hydrogen gives us a vector that allows us to distribute that renewable energy to where it's needed, and then we use the fuel cell system, such as the one we took to Goodwood, to turn it back into electricity again and put it in the car. So it was an eye-catching way of showing our capability and getting people to think about what is possible in terms of electric vehicle and power distribution in the future.
Did you get to have a go on the bike?
So I didn't myself, but Siemens, employees did. So Carl Ennis, for example, was one of the riders who took the e-chopper up the famous hill climb at Goodwood. I think he enjoyed it immensely.
Yeah, it must be, when you see that bike, it must be very tempting to think, oh, I'd love to have a go on that bike.
I'd love to agree with you, but the thought of me on that bike is a very bad idea. I can't be trusted with an umbrella, let alone something like that.
We're gearing as a society towards using more electricity, and especially as you've discussed about using it for our transport. Now, are we going to see more of a demand then going forward for electrical usage in our transport, in society in general?
Yes, I think is the answer. So if we look at our network that we have running down our roads, electricity distribution network running down our roads, the local substations, these have been designed and put in over many, many years and are still being put in on the basis of what we now see as relatively low electricity requirements. But if we're serious about decarbonising over the course of the next 10 years, and doing that without greenhouse gas emissions, bearing in mind that natural gas is mainly methane, which is an incredibly damaging greenhouse gas, 85 times worse than carbon dioxide during the first 10 years of its life.
Wow, okay.
So even small leakages of natural gas are extremely damaging. So we're not going to have much in the way of natural gas in the future. That's quite clear for heating our homes. So that means we've got a double whammy, if you like, of needing electricity for our transportation, needing electricity for probably heating our homes as well, potentially using heat pumps and other new technology. Then we've got to find other ways of moving this energy around and creating electricity locally. Now, sometimes a certain amount of grid augmentation or batteries to deal with key points where there's shortages for a few minutes will be absolutely ideal. But for years, those big piles of coal outside power stations have represented huge amounts of chemical energy storage. And we need to duplicate that in a renewable form. And hydrogen and hydrogen-based fuels are a great way of doing that.
And what do you see being the future of electricity, and what type of technology do you think we could see in the next few years that's going to power what we do?
So electricity is key to meeting this decarbonisation challenge that I really started with. An obvious example of that is electric vehicles, whether they're battery electric vehicles or fuel cell electric vehicles. They're fundamentally, the motive power is coming from electricity, and we're going to need a way of getting that energy into our vehicles, for example. Similarly, other areas of industry and society which currently use, are pretty much wholly dependent on fossil energy sources, are going to increasingly move to electricity because it gives you a way of decarbonising that energy supply. So electricity, as Andrew was just discussing, in future is going to be used more and more, and that then presents a challenge both in terms of generating that electricity in a carbon-free way and then distributing that electricity on grid. That works brilliantly. The challenge there is to increase the capacity of the grid, both locally with sort of local distribution is often where the bottleneck is, but also potentially the national transmission network. So the sort of technologies that we're going to see become increasingly common in the next few years are those which use electricity for the jobs that we've traditionally used fossil fuels for, and also those technologies that can produce electricity in a carbon-free way. And there's going to be a whole range of technologies that are required here. There isn't a single sort of technology option that solves our decarbonisation problems. Our energy systems are so big and so complicated that we're going to need a portfolio approach very much to solve this carbonisation issue. But yeah, expect to see more electric vehicles, more renewable generation, probably carbon capture and storage, looking at the way we use our energy, increased efficiency, looking at things that help us to load shift, time shift, distribute renewable energy like hydrogen, really to meet that decarbonisation challenge.
It's probably worth also saying that one of the great things about working with a company like Siemens is not only do you get the global presence, but you also get that enormous breadth of technologies. So if we can imagine that whole supply chain, and it's not that Siemens cover everything, but they cover a lot of it. So at one end, you've got electrolyzers, which might be installed near your solar farm, something of that sort, producing the hydrogen. Well, Siemens manufacture electrolyzers. And then right down the other end, with lots of electrical equipment required in between, of course, and all sorts of equipment, you've got things like requirements for electrical connectivity, battery systems, and then in large systems where we need a lot of energy, then of course we have Siemens engines, so turbines, gas turbines and reciprocating engines that can absolutely, there's a lot of work going on in Siemens to burn things like gases like hydrogen in an extremely green manner with very, very low emissions. And this work is going to pay off. So that scope of Siemens just comes into play magnificently in this area. And let's face it, if we're going to decarbonise in 10 years, we need big companies making big contributions, which is actually why Geopura has been formed, because in actual fact, Siemens, to their credit, realised that they need to work with other companies. That yes, they can make a massive contribution, but even a company such as Siemens has gaps, and they can be filled in by other companies that will get involved. So it really is very exciting.
Big thanks to Ian and Andrew for taking the time out to chat with us on the podcast. Remember, you can find Electrium and the Electrium podcast across your social feeds on Twitter, Facebook and LinkedIn. Just search for Electrium. Now, I'm going to leave you with a chat with Jurgen Maier, CEO of Siemens UK, who appeared on the Insdiers podcast from Siemens, recorded at the Goodwood Festival of Speed, to discuss this project.
About 6 months ago, we set a challenge to say, can we create some totally renewable energy for Goodwood to charge their electric vehicles? And here we are, 6 months later. Not just have we done it, we've done it in the most innovative way. But this is totally cool. We're getting lots of interest from customers here. It's really brilliant. It is not often, actually, where you come to something like this, where you just get customers turning up and saying, how can I buy one? You know, I want one of these. Now, actually, it isn't quite a product yet, this, because, you know, it's a bit of an innovation project. But what an event like this shows is that there is real commercial interest. So we can now go away with confidence and see how we can deliver this into a business model. Because what the customer wants to buy here is he actually doesn't want to buy the hydrogen fuel cell and all of the hydrogen. That all sounds too complicated and too risky for them. What they want to buy is they want to buy the kilowatts. They want to buy, you know, so many pounds per the 11 kilowatts that I need to put into one of these charging stations. That's what they want to buy, and we need to work out that business model, and I think we can do it.
And of course, Siemens represented in many ways here at the festival. I think Siemens is really shining here.
We are, and I'm going to say, you know, every year we do a great job here, because not just do we bring brilliant technology, we've got very clever at how we tell our story, and to punch through here at Goodwood, when you've got Aston Martin and Jaguar Land Rover and Bentley, you know, all showing their flash new products, and you know, and our technology I think is super cool, but you know, the punters here probably prefer the latest in Aston Martin. But actually, when we say, look, this is totally renewable, and by the way, by the edge of this hydrogen fuel cell, we're having a little tea party going on, and guess what? The tea is being brewed from the waste product of this fuel cell. And the fuel cell waste product is, of course, water. But not just is it water, it is deionized, it is pure water. And so I've had a drink earlier with the Duke of Richmond, and the media interest was absolutely huge. There was more people here watching the Duke and myself drink a cup of tea than they were launching the new Aston Martin just down the road. There you are. How cool is that?
And what did it taste like? Because you seem like you didn't just take a sip for the cameras. You seem like you went back for more.
No, well, both the Duke and myself thought, this is a really nice cup of tea because it is the purest of water. And I did actually have a bit of a sip of the water myself before we boiled it, and it definitely was. There wasn't that that slight chlorinated taste we have in our normal water. That just wasn't there. It absolutely was pure. Honestly, I'm not just kidding. The tea tasted great. But then in sunshine like this at Goodwood, tea's got to taste good here, hasn't it?